Hello and welcome back to the Purposeful Shift. I'm Emma Bryant and I am really glad that you are here with me today. Today's episode is about gratitude. And gratitude has become one of those words that we hear so often that I wonder if it's almost in danger of losing its meaning. You can open social media and someone is telling you to start a gratitude journal. You can read a self-development book and you'll probably find a chapter on practicing gratitude. And if you listen to successful entrepreneurs or athletes or other public speakers, many of them will tell you that gratitude has been one of the habits that's transformed their lives. For a long time, I wasn't entirely sure how I felt about gratitude. I guess I was probably skeptical, not because I disagreed with the idea of gratitude, but because it sometimes felt a little bit simplistic in the way it was actually described to us. As though if we simply wrote down 3 things every morning that we're grateful for, that all of our dreams would come true, or that somehow everything in our lives would just fall into place the way we'd like them to. And cynics, of course, would say that life doesn't work like that. Some seasons that we go through are genuinely really difficult for us, and some experiences are deeply painful and hurtful, and some days we simply just feel too overwhelmed. But the more I've explored it and practiced gratitude myself, the more I've realized that gratitude isn't about pretending that those things don't exist. Gratitude isn't really about pretending that everything is good and everything's going to be okay. It's about noticing that not everything in our lives is bad. It's about being conscious of what we already have to be grateful for. A few years ago, I read a book called Everything You Need You Have by Gerard Kite. And Kite talks about unhappiness being connected to our difficulty in retreating from our thinking minds and taking pleasure from just being, from being alive, from being in the here and now. And through his book, he encourages us to consider things from a different perspective. In this case, what it means to be at home. But what I find really interesting about this is that when practicing gratitude, we are also training our minds to think from a different perspective. I think that's one of the reasons that gratitude can be so powerful. Not because it magically changes our circumstances overnight, but because it changes where we place our attention, where we place our focus, and in turn, it changes our perspective. And there's actually some really fascinating science behind this. So our brains have what's known as a negativity bias. From an evolutionary perspective, this of course makes perfect sense because our ancestors survived because they noticed danger. They remembered threats. They paid attention to what could go wrong. Our brains were designed to keep us alive, not necessarily to keep us happy. And in today's world, where our threat to life is not as constant as it was then, we have adapted to notice danger in different ways. So we're guarded, we're skeptical, we notice criticism more often than compliments. We might remember awkward conversations more vividly than lovely afternoons that we've had with our friends. And we tend to focus on what's missing more easily than what's already present. And practicing gratitude, it doesn't remove that bias, but it can help us to balance it. So researchers, including Robert Emmons and Martin Seligman, have spent years studying gratitude and its impact on well-being. Emmons found that those who kept gratitude journals on a weekly basis exercised more regularly, they reported fewer physical symptoms, and they felt better about their lives as a whole and more optimistic about their upcoming week. Participants who kept gratitude lists were also more likely to have made progress towards important personal goals. And those who practiced gratitude daily were more likely to have helped others with a problem or provided emotional support. Findings from across their work suggest that regularly noticing the positive experiences in our lives can improve our mood, can strengthen relationships, can increase optimism, and can even help us sleep better. The psychologist Barbara Fredrickson talks about this through her broaden and build theory, suggesting that positive emotions help us think more creatively, become better at problem solving, and more open to possibilities, and build lasting psychological resources like well-being and resilience. And I find that really encouraging. And it reminds me that where we place our attention matters. One thing I've also noticed is that gratitude appears in many conversations about manifestation. So people like Roxie Nafousi, Noor, Hibbert and Vanessa, Jaden often talk about gratitude as a way of shifting from a mindset of scarcity towards one of abundance. Now, whether the language of manifestation resonates with you or not, I think there's something really interesting happening here, because when we're constantly focused on what we don't have, our lives can begin to feel defined by absence. There's always another milestone to reach, or another thing to achieve, or another reason to believe that we'll finally be happy when we reach a certain point in time or a certain thing. And gratitude can help us interrupt that pattern. By recognizing what we are already grateful for, we remind ourselves that alongside our hopes for the future, there is also goodness in our present. And I do believe that we should absolutely have dreams. I do believe that we should set goals. And I think we should want to grow. That ambition is definitely important. But we can do all of that. We can have those goals and those dreams. And we can focus on what we're still aiming for, while still appreciating where we are today and what we already have. So if you're finding it difficult to respond to the question, what am I grateful for? You could ask yourself instead, what in my life has become ordinary, but I would deeply miss it if it were to disappear tomorrow? And suddenly the answers feel different, and the list might become a little bit easier to create. So for me, it could be a conversation with a friend, the freedom to walk by the sea at weekends, the flexibility of running my own business, the opportunity to study again, this podcast community that's slowly growing. These aren't extraordinary things. They're simply parts of my everyday life that I don't always stop to notice and to be grateful and thankful for. When I first asked myself that question the other way round, so not what am I grateful for, but what would I miss if it were to disappear tomorrow, my mind instantly went to loss. I thought of what I had lost recently and what was no longer in my life. And I thought of Griff, who was one of our rescue dogs who we adopted aged 8 and who had a terrible life in Cyprus before flying to be with us in the UK. He was in our lives for a total of 4 years and 4 months. And thinking about Griff makes me feel really sad initially, because I miss him terribly. And I have to challenge myself to reframe my thoughts and to flip them on their head. Instead of thinking about how much I miss him every single day, how he's not by my side when I walk or behind me right now as I record this podcast episode in my shed, I have to instead remember all of the times that he made me smile and the unconditional love that he gave to all of us in the family, and the sofa that he got to spend his golden years on rather than the cage and the concrete kennels. That he learned to forgive and trust again after years of physical and emotional abuse, of all the kindness that he showed us and the lessons that he taught us. And perhaps that's what gratitude really is. It's paying attention. It's seeing the familiar, but with fresh eyes. It's recognizing how to flip a situation and the feelings associated with that into something that is more positive. A reason to smile, a chance to make your heart flutter again. If you have a gratitude journal that you are using, I encourage you to keep going. If you have one that has been sat idle, I urge you to have another go. Maybe change the question to what you would miss and see if that helps prompt your flow. And if you haven't got a gratitude journal or practice at the moment, I hope this gives you something to think on and perhaps encourages you to give it a try and see how it might change your thinking, how it might alter your perspective, and how it might help you focus on how full your life already is. And if you're not ready for a full journal or you just want a taster to get started, I would like to leave you with a simple reflection exercise. If you take a sheet of paper and divide it into 3 columns, in the first column, write, what am I grateful for? In the second column, write, why does this matter to me? And in the third column, write, what does this tell me about what I value? So this goes a little bit deeper than just a list of things to be grateful for, because gratitude doesn't just help us notice what's good. It helps us understand what's important to us. And that in turn can help us make better decisions about how we spend our time, how we use our energy, and how we shape our lives, and how we can start to live with more purpose. I don't feel that gratitude is just about saying thank you more often. I think it's about paying closer attention and allowing our mindset to shift. In doing so, we help ourselves, But the research also suggests that we become kinder humans as a result, and the world surely needs more kindness right now more than ever. When we begin to notice the goodness that's already present, we start to realize that our lives contain far more joy, more beauty, and more meaning than perhaps we've been giving them credit for. Thank you so much for listening to The Purposeful Shift and inviting me to be a small part of your day today. If this episode resonated with you, I would love to hear what you're grateful for at this moment in your life. You can come and join the conversation over on Instagram at The Purposeful Shift. And if you haven't already, please follow or subscribe so you don't miss future conversations. Until next time, take care and enjoy the process of noticing what's already here for you. See you soon.